Welcome to Scanners Offline, a Dropfleet podcast by Matt, Will,
and JJ.
The news!
Okay, so here is the news. On the 10th of December, we have a tournament in Cardiff at Firestorm Games. 19 people have signed up on Facebook. Hopefully there'll be a few more there, but we don't know. We're all going to be there. Hopefully we'll see some of you there.
That's the next major UK
Dropfleet next major one.
I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard of any others coming up yet.
Actually, there is one at Beachhead 2018.
Okay, where's Beachhead?
In Bournemouth.
Right.
So that's the event. Beachhead is a wargaming event that's in the Bournemouth Conference Centre, I think. That's going to have a Dropfleet tournament within it.
You need to turn the keyboard noises on your phone so you can hear them.
Okay. How do you pronounce that name? It's a place from Drop Zone.
Tlalacon?
Tlalacon?
So it's the 17th of February, which is interesting because that was when you were thinking of doing. That was around the time you were going to do your next.
That was the provisional date for Maelstrom 2. Yeah, it was.
So that's Saturday, 17th of February, 9 till 6.
And what's it called?
Battle for Tlalacon, Dropfleet Commander at Beachhead 2018.
One more time? Tlashacon?
Tlalacon.
Lalacon.
If there are any Aztecs listening, please get in touch to explain how exactly we should pronounce the word Tlalacon.
Tickets are available on the tournament website. Not sure what the capacity of the event is going to be, but I think it's going to be a standard 3 game.
No major Dropfleet tournament providers have actually gone for the 5 event over 2 days yet, have they? Five games over 2 days. No one's made the jump to that yet.
Not as far as I'm aware.
That'd be interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I know that's the norm for most 40k tournaments. You guys have been to 40k tournaments where it's been 5 over 2 days, haven't you?
I do personally find that 5 games in 2 days is quite a lot. I'm pretty toast by the end of that. So I think the 3 is kind of okay.
I agree. I think the 3, but I think the reason you do it is because when you only do 3 games, it's less sure that the best person has won.
Yeah, with 5, you've got more stats to work out. Who's performed best.
It'd be interesting to see if any future tournaments do go for that. I bet the grand tournament that Hawk were planning before they were taken over by TT Combat, along lines of Magic style, I bet that would have been over 5 games to really sort of weed out the best player. But we'll see if anyone goes for that. War novella. So we've got quite a good thing to talk about for War Stories because myself and JJ, we have recently been to a tournament, and that was back on the weekend of the 20th of November. What was it? 2 weeks ago? Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
It was the 12th of November.
Not 20. The 12th of November. You're dead right, because it was a day before my birthday, so I should definitely have remembered that. So we went down to Bromley, Warboar hosting, and took part in that Dropfleet tournament. So we'll give a quick recount of our 3 games, how it went. JJ, what was your first game like? Who were you drawn against?
So my first game was against a Shaltari player, the one and only Shaltari player at the event. Just my luck.
We should point out that there were 9 players.
Yeah.
So 1 out of 9s. Their proportions are that's almost the same as Maelstrom.
Yeah, so we had
3 out of 24.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty similar sort of percentage. It still surprises me how few there are, seeing as how good Shaltari seem to be.
Yeah, I mean, we are guilty. We've complained about Shaltari being powerful, and wherever we've been around the country, there's not been very many Shaltari players. I think it's because they're not an easy faction to use well when you're a new player, and lots of players are still relatively new to the game. So
yeah, I mean, Phil, who I played, was not a new player as such, but he wasn't very experienced. He hadn't had very many games with the fleet, I don't think. So he was kind of a little bit unsure in some areas, but it was a good game. We played Moonshot. He managed to kill pretty much everything in my fleet, bar like 1 frigate or something. No, I killed like 1 frigate of his.
Was this because he took lots of orbital combat cruisers of Shaltari?
Yeah, so he held the space really well, but I managed to pull off was it a draw or was it a loss? It was very close in either way, but that was because I held the ground, because I went so ground asset heavy. I managed to hold both the fort clusters and my home space station, which brought the sport back for me.
Yeah, he looked like quite a fun guy to play against actually as well. He looked really enthusiastic.
Yeah, he was. It was a really good game. He's a really good guy.
Yeah.
Can't find him on Facebook, so if you hear this, let us know, because I can't find you.
My first game I was drawn against, it was the one person who, looking at all the fleets there, I didn't want to play, because I knew it's Chris, and Chris finished 4th in Maelstrom, so I knew he was a good player. And when I was running Maelstrom, I could see that he seemed to know what he was doing, and it was a pretty intelligent Scourge list. And being an experienced Scourge player myself, I know when I'm looking at a Scourge list that has a clear plan behind it.
Scourge grudge match.
It was, yeah. So Scourge against Scourge was always going to be bloody. But key moments kind of went my way. I think Chris found it difficult to deal with the amount of close action I like to bring in a Scourge tournament list, which is 2 Wyvern and 4 Djinn, backed up by a Basilisk and a Hydra. So it's lots of close action. And around the moon, I managed to tuck in quite tight behind it. So there was no real way for him to avoid. He had to sort of commit and not make the most of his Sphinxes going weapons free and things like that. And then once I got the upper hand there, it all kind of ran in my direction. I managed to steal his home space station right at the end, so won that one 20-0. Your second game?
My second game was against against the other UCM player, Stephen. So that was a good game, a bit of a UCM grudge match.
I liked his paint scheme. It was a bit different, wasn't it? Sort of really light green, greeny yellow.
Yeah, greeny with like yellow highlights.
It's nice.
It was very effective paint scheme. He was a good player. He definitely thought through what he was doing. He brought a lot of guns. There was just so much firepower and frigates. He had Taipeis, Toulons. He was chucking buckets of dice in most cases.
So I'm guessing that once again you were flattened in the air.
It was pretty balanced.
Okay.
Because he had St. Petersburg, which did really well. Actually, I was very surprised about that. It's not one of my favourite heavy cruisers, but with the siphon ability, being able to, he managed to double tap with it.
Yeah.
Using the fire twice, overcharge lasers ability, which was nice. The Avalon promptly then killed it in return, but never mind. It was a good game. That one I did win, but that was on ground again.
Okay.
I significantly outlaunched him. He had 1 San Fran and like 3 New Orleans compared to my 2 San Frans and 8 New Orleans. So I completely.
We should point out that the general reaction from other players was that both of us, I think the other players there, were surprised at the amount of launch that we both brought.
Ground launch,
The amount of ground assets that we brought. Because you went with 2 San Franciscos and 8 New Orleans.
And Madrids.
As well as Madrid's for bombardment, but no Corvettes.
Corvettes.
I went with 1 Chimera, but 9 Gargoyles. We will be coming in Whitesville Wisdom to talking about ground assets, but that seemed to give us a bit of an advantage against people who aren't used to playing against that many ground assets, didn't it?
We were kind of trialling it a little bit to see how well it did from a competitive standpoint, because there's been a lot of debate in the community about how much ground assets we should have, which is what we'll come to later in the podcast. But because there's been a lot of discussion on it, we thought we'd try it out, go a bit more heavy with ground assets, and to be honest,
it does work.
The results speak for themselves. Really.
I don't know whether that's a good thing long term for the game's health, but it does for now. It does work quite well. Or it works well against people who've perhaps not played that many ground assets, or aren't familiar with what to do against that many.
Yeah, I feel like there's a bit of a skill gap. If you take a lot of ground assets against someone who doesn't know what to do, you're definitely going to win. Whereas if you don't take too many ground assets and you know what to do against someone who has lots of ground assets, you're probably going to keep it equal, same skill levels. You're going to end up with a draw.
Yeah.
So those ground assets, they push that skill barrier apart even more. So you end up with 20 nils against.
I did find that having more ground launch did lead to us having a bit of a lopsided kill point situation. I tended to lose quite a lot of ships because I had a lot less to fight with, because so many points were invested in land and ground assets. I felt like it gave them a lot more, inverted commas, easy kill points.
So really, the game should benefit your opponents a bit more for going to the effort of destroying your orbital assets, orbital ships. And right now, 2 points for critical location possibly doesn't do that. Yeah. Which is why, in our Escalation League, locally at Red Warsock, we are trialling 3 victory points for critical locations throughout the entire league. And I'm deliberately trying to write scenarios which are a bit more balanced between critical locations and ground. We'll see if that helps and discourages our own tactic that we used at Warble. Anyway, to quickly do my second game, I played against PHR, and it's a fairly solid PHR list. Use of Calypsos, had a Minos battleship, 2 troop ships, 1 Orpheus, 1 Ganymede. Pandoras, which were a real pain to deal with, actually, because 3 of them went straight up the middle and started putting spikes on things, and you sort of don't want to waste the cruiser's firepower on dealing with them, but in the end I had to.
Yeah, the problem is they're quite expensive for what they do, which is why I don't use them.
With a cap of 3. And so I won that fairly comfortably again. If I just talk about the key point rather than going into loads of detail, my opponent was not so familiar with the effectiveness of Jin, and almost the whole game turned on that, which was I was able to get 4 Jin into a position where they could attack last turn activation, attack a troop ship, and then first turn activation, attack a troop ship again, and possibly a different troop ship if I killed the first one. So my Jin rolled well and destroyed that troop ship. Second turn, next turn, first activation, went on, destroyed another one. So removing both troop ships within the space of
I hate Jin.
5 minutes was powerful.
Yeah, I feel that Jin are a little bit undercosted.
Yeah,
no, Jin are fine. Nothing should change about Jin.
They're going to get hit with a nerf hammer.
Yeah.
No, it won't happen.
Let's just hope TT take their time doing any more FAQs.
We shall see.
Yeah, because how many points are Jin at the moment? They are 43 points. They could probably be more expensive. I wouldn't gripe too much about
You'd
that.
still take them if they were 3 points more expensive, probably.
46 points for a Jin? That's probably fair. Yeah. You want like, what, 50?
To be fair,
How high can we go before it comes in a light cruiser?
Yeah, to be fair, they could be the same point, because a Pandora's 50 points, and a Jin will kill whatever it hits. If you're fighting Jin, you're basically hoping that the thing they kill explodes and kills them, because generally you can't stop them from getting at least 1 cruiser kill.
You found that in one of your test games against Shaltari, against Scourge as Shaltari, didn't you, JJ?
Yeah, I've been testing out a Shaltari fleet, and the whole double tap with the Jin thing is just brutal. 2 games in a row, he did the same thing, despite me being aware of what he was going to do and spreading out to minimise the impact.
And you've been playing my Jin for years. Like, it's just hard to deal with it. Yeah.
Last turn, activation turn 1, max thrust up. First activation turn 2, just killed whatever it fired at. It could have, luckily my motherships were out of reach, but just took out 2 void gates both games.
Yeah. Your last game?
My last game was against Rob. He was a Scourge player. He certainly seemed to know his fleet quite well. Lovely guy, good game. Unfortunately, I felt quite sorry for him because it was a pretty brutal ending.
Good tactics on your part, or the dice, or both?
Both. I did really well with my cards, my command cards. I drew the one that got me free Rio.
Oh, yeah.
I got overcharged lasers twice with the Avalon, which helped. So I managed to double fire it, silent run, double fire it, silent run. And then because it had gone so far across the board, it then captured his home location.
That's pretty rare.
On the 5. So it went straight down the middle, killing things twice, and then took the home location. I'd managed to get ground units into all 5 clusters.
Overwhelming.
So I'd captured all 5 clusters, all the critical locations, and on kill points I'd pretty much killed everything. I think he had maybe 3 gargoyles left in atmosphere. Other than that, I'd lost not very much, unfortunately. So I was really lucky in my rolling. I literally drew the command card I needed every turn. I had.
Sometimes you get games like that, don't you, where everything's useful. Yeah.
So I rolled well, good command cards. By then that was the 4th or 5th game in theory with that same fleet, the UCM list. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I think for me the thing that made it best was that scenario suits a ground asset heavy list.
It was grid control, last one?
Yeah, so
with the orbital lasers.
Yeah, so it's got 5 clusters.
Yeah, it was.
So you can score 3, 6, 9, but the home ones are double. So I was getting 6 for the ground on both.
Yeah.
Because I managed to build a mass transit between the two, and I'd loaded up my home cluster with troop ships. So they all went across, captured his home ground. So that was 6 from mine, 6 from his, and then the space 6 and 6 again.
It's very, very good use of the mass transit card.
Yeah.
That worked well.
I slightly regret teaching you that tactic.
So I'm really sorry, Rob, if you hear this. Great game. Love to have a rematch.
You should be proud if you taught him that as a tactic. Well,
I believe it was, I'm not going to do this, but this is something I could do in a game, because it was a tournament practice game. I was like, this is going to totally break the scenario, so I'm not going to do it. And then
yeah. Final game for me. Oh, it was a very tough game. Played against Michael Russell, who is, I'm fairly sure I'm remembering this right. He's the Brighton Talon. So very, really nice guy, lovely, very up on rules. We had a few things we had to look up, and a couple of things that I'd not seen the fine print of actually. It's not often anymore that I find bits that I've been doing slightly wrong. But really close game. Basically, through the middle of ground control, Michael went really heavy down the middle, because obviously there's the double scoring home cluster, the middle one with the 4 militaries, and then my home cluster.
Yeah.
Quite early on, I decided to just not fight him, basically. Sent everything to left and right, and put lots of gargoyles down onto the ground. Because only my Basilisk was facing a battleship and a battle cruiser. It was the Minos and the... Oh, I want to say the Scipio, I think. A Minos, a Scipio, and 2 troop ships down the middle, all protected by 2 Calypsos, which is an incredibly tough amount of armour and reduction of shots.
Yeah.
My Basilisk was facing off against that alone. So I had a choice of sort of diving in and doing a bit of damage, Calypso's nullifying it and whatnot. Looked at that and thought, I'm going to have to play this differently. So I went kind of exclusively after the victory points. I knew going into the final game I didn't really have to win it, because I was quite far ahead on victory points to everyone else and tournament points. So I just needed to not lose by a lot. So at a key point on turn 4, I actually managed to, rather than throw the Basilisk into a combat, I max thrusted it all the way to his home cluster, where Michael made a single mistake, which was to not leave his battlecruiser in low orbit. He moved it, kept it in high orbit, but within 6 of the home cluster. So I managed to steal 6 victory points there at turn 4.
Ouch.
Yeah, just to go back to mine as well. Actually, I was slightly wrong. The Avalon didn't double tap on the second time. It max thrusted and did the same thing as you. So my Avalon in my last game in turn 6 max thrusted onto his home cluster to take the space. So I think for that scenario, when they're worth double victory points, max thrusting something over to that home cluster, especially when it's a heavy.
Yeah, it worked quite well.
Works really well.
So we had a pretty close game play out, and in the end it worked out to be, I believe it was a 12-8 to me, possibly 11-9.
Just what you needed to take first place. Then.
Yeah, because JJ shot up with his 20-0. I was worried he was going to overtake me.
Not quite. Next time.
But overall, we want to say thanks to Warbor for putting that on, and the tournament organiser. And we really enjoyed it. It was nice to go down and have a day of playing Dropfleet in the tournament. Yeah,
it's great. Great venue. They've got drinks there as well, so it's nice relaxing place to be and have your lunch.
I wish I lived closer to it.
Yeah,
it'd be lovely.
We need one here. Anyone that wants to set up a business in Birmingham, we're well behind that.
So, Fleet Academy this week, focusing on some ships. We have had a question from a listener who was something that they'd like us to discuss. What was that question, Will?
The question was, which is the best battlecruiser?
And JJ went ahead and answered some of this in text. So his initial question by Eternal Wargamer on Twitter was, which is the best battlecruiser? JJ answered that we'd kind of already discussed this in episode 1, and that we had talked about the Basilisk being the most powerful and generally agreeing on that. But Eternal Wargamer asked us what we thought of the Avalon as a direct comparison. So we are going to do a brief comparison of the Avalon versus the Basilisk. So, looking at the stats, in speed, the Basilisk wins out because it has thrust 10 against thrust 8 of the Avalon. Usually Scourge have the advantage in that respect. Then hull points, they're exactly the same. The Basilisk has a bigger signature, but that is negated by the fact that it can use stealth and a full cloak, so I don't think that's as much of an issue.
Stealth and full cloak being the big things, in my opinion. The Basilisk has the big advantage.
I think I know where you're going to come down on the side of this. Yeah. Then scan range is exactly the same. They've both got 6 inches. Armour, I mean, the Avalon's got a lot better armour. That 14 hull is protected by a 3-up save. How significant is that across the game, do we think? That's a point in favour of the Avalon, surely.
Stealth and full cloak means you're going to get shot at a lot less.
Yeah.
So the fact that your armour's different, it's
Doesn't
not
matter as
really
much.
a difference, especially as I believe the Avalon has flash on its main gun.
Flash and bloom.
Yeah, that's the one, bloom. That's the full I was thinking of.
Lights you both up.
Yeah.
Point defence is very similar. 7 for the Avalon, 8 for the Basilisk, but that's in line with all the Scourge ships having 1 better point defence than the UCM equivalents. Then points value, the Avalon is 10 points cheaper. If that's going to make a big difference. Not really.
No.
I'd be happy to spend the extra 10 points for the Basilisk over an Avalon.
You'd be happy to spend it for that. Okay, sure.
I'd spend more than that probably.
195 compared to 205. Then we go to the most important thing to compare, really, which is the weapons. Now, the Avalon has 2 sets of 4 attack dice, 4 up, UF 4200 mass driver turrets. They're 2 separate weapon systems, which means to fire those, it would need to go weapons free to do that.
Yep.
That's rarely going to happen. In fact, I looked at this and asked JJ earlier, have you ever fired those guns at any point?
Yeah, I have. When I've gone weapons free, I've generally found something to shoot them at. I think.
So there was something waiting in line, so you could use the burn through laser and the guns. You were lucky enough to have something just park in front of the Avalon, so it could use its laser and fire the guns. Or did you use weapons free in a different situation?
Yeah, I have gone weapons free with it. I think it probably is only once though.
Okay.
In
a year.
And I have fired it with that card that allows you to fire two weapon systems without going weapons free as well to do it.
Okay, for a little extra firepower, yeah, I get that.
Because then you don't need to go weapons free, you can turn. I think if it ever came down to a choice between the big gun and the mass drivers, it's pretty unlikely you'd choose the mass drivers.
Of course.
Yeah, I was saying to Matt earlier, the only situation where I could ever see doing that is if by firing your main gun to shoot a small target, be it a light cruiser or a frigate, that being the only options available in front of you, that would then leave you vulnerable because it's got bloom. You'd light yourself up with a minor spike. If you were then thinking, oh, there's a battle cruiser or a battleship about to come around the corner and shoot me next turn, you might choose not to fire the bloom weapon maybe to avoid being seen.
So in summary, it's very situational.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that you'd do that.
But the reason you would take an Avalon would be the main weapon. And that is the Viper Super Heavy Laser, which I do really like. Not being a UCM player, I still like it. I don't like having it fired against me, for obvious reasons, because it has lock 3 up, 4 attack dice. It's front narrow, like all lasers, but it's burn through cap 8, and puts a spike on the opponent, or a major spike, if you can do 3 hits or 3 damage.
Damage, I believe.
Damage.
I think you have to do damage for flash to work.
Check that later. But you do put a spike on yourself with bloom. But for the combo, that laser is so powerful. Rolling 4 dice, hitting on 3s. I've not seen many firings of the Avalon where it doesn't reach the cap. It's consistently very heavy damage.
It will generally cripple whatever it's firing at as well.
Yeah. Normally, I'll fluff it and miss all 4 on the first shot, which has happened multiple times, in fact, or 8 crits.
Yeah. So
it's very rare.
So you find it swings between being incredibly effective and nothing.
I would say more times than not, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
It's because with a normal laser, you only get 2 dice, and it's much easier to fluff that than it is 4 dice. So I think the 4 dice gives you an advantage.
On the face of it, that laser seems that's pretty good. Yeah, points to the Avalon does is pretty good laser.
Apart from bloom.
Apart from bloom is a downside. Then sharp missile bays is a close action. That's okay. It's the standard UCM cruiser equipment, isn't it?
Don't think I've ever seen an Avalon use its close action.
It's usually further away.
Yeah, and by the time it's in range close action, it's dead because it's a big priority target and it's normally on a minor spike at the very least.
I bet JJ's used it because you often throw ships into the middle of stuff. Yep, yes, nodding.
Oh yes.
Oh, those good times that I've used the Avalon's close action.
Well, generally I find the UCM deal fairly well at close range. It's only really the Scourge that kind of outmatch them at close range because of the 3+ armour and the good hit points. So I think they usually are alright at kind of holding their own. I'd say with the Avalon I'm usually a bit more cautious and do try and keep it a bit further back because you can normally hit something from farther away with like a lemur or something like that.
So the Avalon is very good at deleting single ships. Well, not even deleting, not as much as a diamond, but heavily damaging single ships each time. We should point out as well that it could go on standard orders and still fire that main laser. So it's not necessarily going to have to use special orders to do it. However, it's still going to put a spike on itself with bloom.
Yeah.
So it might as well have gone.
Yeah, so it's effectively doing special. And if it has the course change, it's major spike.
Away.
Yeah.
So it is going to draw fire.
Yeah.
Not the Basilisk. The Basilisk is not going to draw fire as much because of full cloak and stealth, which means it can fire while silent running, one weapon, and it can It can never get spikes with a full cloak until it's crippled. So its weapon systems. It's got an ocular beam array with 2 attack dice, 2 damage, and it's got 2 separate weapons for ocular beam phalanxes, which are 3s to hit, 3 dice, and double damage as well. So what that means is the Basilisk has a lot wider arc it can fire in because it covers front and both sides with at least 3 dice on each side. 3 dice to the left, 3 dice to the right, 2 to the front, and the side dice can fire front and side, which means the Basilisk weapons they sort of converge in the front arc. So the Basilisk is most effective going weapons free on something in the front arc. Then it is rolling 8 dice with 3s to hit, which each do double damage.
So it's also
Evil Basilisk.
going to cripple whatever it shoots at. But it has to be weapons free to do it.
It does have to be weapons free, which means your opponent can position to try and avoid that. It's true. But it's also flexible when it goes weapons free in that it can hit multiple targets if the situation demands it, which I like. And while it's going weapons free, it's not going to pick up any spikes, which is also good. So that is good. We know that's heavy damage output.
Good being a slight understatement there. Being able to go weapons free and not gain any spike is amazing.
We've still got a signature of 8 inches. That's quite big. That's not that great. It could be reduced to signature.
You can also silent run and fire a gun as well.
Yeah, 3. You could fire 3 dice rolling with 3s to hit that each do double damage. Also, which is enough to blink out frigates and
kill something that's heavily damaged already, or something that knocks something over that cripple limit.
It does do less damage than the Avalon on paper. If it was 1-on-1, toe to toe, the Avalon's going to almost certainly do 8 crits.
That's really? You think it almost certainly do 8 crits? I don't think so. It's not almost certainly. Surely not.
The problem is, I think the Basilisk will
hitting on 3
fire
to start
first
with.
every time.
Yeah. So if we come to a vote then, who thinks that the Avalon is the best ship of the 3? I'm going to describe how all of us are sitting here without raising our hands. Who among us feels that the Basilisk / Akuma is the best ship of the 3?
Yeah.
Aye.
Motion carried.
The Basilisk is overall a better battlecruiser than the Avalon. That is not to say the Avalon is not a good battlecruiser. I think it's up there with the better ones. I don't like playing them because they are good.
Yeah.
They're solidly good. But the Basilisk Akuma is solidly great. It's just in the next bracket up.
The Avalon's more of a sniper rifle, whereas the Basilisk is more of a heavy machine gun. I think you can take...
I love that analogy, that's great.
Because you can engage multiple targets and do quite a bit of damage, whereas the Avalon can just kill one thing very effectively.
Damage one thing very effectively. I wouldn't, kill something every time.
I don't think either. I think both have got fair chances of crippling and or killing their target.
I would say the Basilisk is like a machine gun that fires frag grenades.
Let's not get into specifics.
And it's got a silencer on the end, and the guy's wearing camo. Whereas
as well, the grenades make no noise.
Yeah, he wears that invisibility cloak from Predator.
Whereas your Atlantis is a guy with a sniper rifle, but he's wearing like a bright red coveralls or something, stood in the middle of a field.
Like those hunters wear, so that they're not like...
Yeah.
So they're in an open field wearing an orange high-vis jacket with a sniper rifle.
Yeah.
They're just being silly.
Whitesville Wisdom.
So, topic of the moment, really. It's quite important, really, in Dropfleet, and it's a major game mechanic, but we are going to talk about how many ground assets is the right amount of ground assets to bring to a game. Now, when I say right amount, I suppose that adjective is quite important, because there's how many is the fair amount to have a nice game, and how many is an overwhelming amount.
There's also the fact of personal opinion as well. You know, certain people are going to find different amounts of ground assets suit their game style.
Yeah, for a while I've been trying to, up until a couple of months ago, I've been sort of trying to work through and defend the argument that you can do it with not many. Or like, my old benchmark really was 1 troop ship, 6 strike carriers.
Yeah.
As a Scourge player. And because everyone else in our area and in Red Warsock kind of did the same thing, none of us really needed to increase the amount of ground assets we were taking, because we were having even-ish games. And no one really suddenly went, oh, I'm going to bring 15 strike carriers. No one just jumped to that. So we didn't have to deal with it as a problem. It's more something we've become aware of from the community's discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the games I had at UK Games Expo was a PHR player, and he had, I think it was 13 or 14 Medeas.
Wow.
And that pretty much won in the game. There was nothing I could do on the ground. When I did manage to land stuff, he bombarded it.
Yeah.
And then just covered everywhere.
We should point out you could have landed on the places where he already had stuff.
Yeah, well, that's what I was trying to do. But if I was landing into a new area, he'd just blow it up and then land his own troops, and then once I just couldn't.
I've not seen PHR players do it as much, to be fair.
He had 2 troop ships as well. 13 Medeas. Didn't have a lot else.
Quick rough maths. I mean, 15 Medeas times 39 points.
I'm sure it's 14. I'm sure it's 14.
14 Medeas.
It's a lot of ground assets.
Yeah, it is.
It's almost too much.
Yeah, I mean, it felt quite one-sided for me at the time, because my list that I was using for that event for UCM had only 1 San Fran, I think.
Yeah, you only bought 1 that time.
And I think I had 6 New Orleans, or maybe 8. I can't remember.
So right now, as a UCM player, where are you landing on how many ground assets to bring, generally?
So the list I'm using at the moment has 2 San Franciscos, so that's 12 ground assets each. You know.
Just 12 total, 6 each.
Yeah. So there's that, and I think 8 New Orleans is what I'm using at the moment, and that's pretty good. Having used that list at War, I'd almost be tempted to put another 2 New Orleans and take it up to 10.
Because it did so well.
Because they did so well.
Yeah.
But I don't want to, because then I'd have to sacrifice all the cool toys that I've got in the list as well. So.
I think that would be effective. I'm a little bit sad that I think that would be effective.
Yeah, me too.
Because I don't want the game to become just how many ground assets you bring.
Well, every game has weaknesses, and for me, the weakness with Dropfleet tends to be the ground combat. That is the weakest area of the game, rules-wise and play-wise, and it gets cluttered, and there's various bits and pieces involved. And I kind of feel like lists that are better at ground combat is taking fun away from the game for me, because if I take a ground asset heavy list, it's all my time and effort's going into moving counters around on the board rather than flying ships around shooting each other.
Fighting with ships between ships and
for
destroying things.
Yeah, it's the
which
fun
is
part.
more fun.
Yeah, so I think the ground combat does need some work and some balancing to reduce the effectiveness of ground assets or increase the effectiveness of scoring in space.
Shoutari, and you're more better placed to chip in on this now because you are now becoming a Shoutari player.
Traitor!
Newborn Shoutari player. And the lists I see tend to vary between 2, 3 or 4 emeralds, with varying numbers of spare void gates. The old school players perhaps who want to stick to it, I've seen some people still argue that you can win at 1250 with 2 emeralds.
Yeah.
3 seems to be what I see most commonly on lists. Some sort of min-maxing metagamers I've seen proposing 4 emeralds. I've never played 4 emeralds. I've played 3. I've played 2. What do you think about that with Shoutari?
I think if you're taking 4, you're probably leaning quite heavily on a diamond to do all of your space combat, which can work really well because the diamond's really good. But if you face an opponent who knows how to fight a diamond, you're probably going to lose that diamond very quickly, and then all of your emeralds are going to die fairly soon afterwards.
The usual tactics of fighting Shoutari of either go after the void gates or the emeralds is not going to be as valid against that kind of list, I think, because you take out 4 of the motherships, it's going to be hard.
And how many void gates are you going to have with those 4 emeralds?
Well, 3 each, 12 plus at least 3, but 1 spare for each, maybe 16, 15 void gates.
And then if you've got a diamond as well with a void gate.
I think I've seen lists like that, and they only have room for like a basalt spare.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just like diamond, basalt, all ground assets. At least the Shaltari have to have emeralds in low orbit and high orbit. That's one mitigating factor.
Yeah.
Other factions don't have to do that. UCM is where I seem to see it in the list the most, actually. It's just like pure New Orleans lists. Up to 15. Over 12, I start to think. That's definitely... but it seems to be effective, which is the frustrating thing. We don't want to encourage everyone to just start making loads and loads of strike carriers.
Really
Because I don't think it's good for the fun of the game. We are looking at ways to fix this ourselves in our games. And as we mentioned already, like 3 points for a critical location, because then that encourages you to put more effort into the space combat.
Yeah.
I hope something like that, a little small change comes along. Other changes are a bit more difficult to do. Some people have proposed improving bombardment as a counter, improving corvettes as a counter.
I think improving bombardment would go some way towards it, and it would also alleviate some of the issues with some of the bombardment ships in the game as well. But we'll come back to those later.
Yeah.
The problem with improving bombardment is that you then put PHR at a big disadvantage because all of their bombardment ships are support bombardment rather than
you have no specialist
bombardment. They're all ships that sort of bombard to blow up a sector that to kill enemy ground assets rather than destroying the entire cluster, which
true.
UCM, Scourge and Shaltari all have. So that's something you'd have to maybe rebalance. You'd have to rebalance PHR almost then.
I've heard corvettes cheaper, perhaps.
Yeah, there's also the fact we haven't seen lots of high strike carriers
to
fight against, so we haven't developed any tactics against it. So there may be some really good tactics that we just haven't thought of yet, which may balance it out in the end as well.
I think making corvettes cheaper would cause new problems. It might improve the ground combat situation, ground asset min-maxing, but I think then you'd end up with loads of people spamming corvettes. The idea of having loads of glass or echoes terrifies me.
Those 2 in particular, and some players I've seen mooting the Echo one already. I've not so much glass. I think now that they were reduced.
Yeah, I
don't see that around as much in people's lists that they put up on Facebook and the forum.
The Echo is very expensive to spam because it's 30 points, which is almost the cost of someone else's frigate. So if you spam it, you're committed to it. And you've only got 2 Pathfinder groups to spam with. So PHRs. So I personally go with 2 troop ships and 4 strike carriers. I have yet to find that I need any more than that. I normally have a Ganymede and an Orpheus.
Yeah.
Ganymede normally does something slightly suicidal and goes for enemy clusters where it can bombard enemy drop. Well, it's on the ground, so that gives me a slight advantage.
Possibly remove a sector if you're not going to get it.
And I use my Europas normally. If someone's spamming, the SRs of their strike carriers generally are higher than my Europas, so I can beat them. I can get my Europas into position and shoot them before they hit their sectors. So I can sort of control some sectors like that as well by blowing up strike carriers.
Yeah, I think that's a valid tactic because that combined with alpha striking out strike carriers.
Yeah.
You have to deliberately plan for that, so you have to have had your own list with a low SR rating. PHR are very good at that because the Europa can fire in 2 directions at once with 4-up shots, which are likely to damage strike carriers.
And Jin are really good at it as well.
Jin are okay at it. I feel like when you look at the points they're removing, I feel like that's not as good a value or use of a Jin. I want my Jin to be destroying the enemy capital ship and doing that because they pull their close action and that's better. So I wouldn't say Scourge. I don't really know which ship's best to do it with.
My Europas, the 5 of them, that's 200 points, which is actually more than your Jin. The advantage I have on my Europas can take a few more hits.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. It's the survivability exchange because then Europas in the backfield are going to survive and be a pain.
Yeah.
Jin are not going to survive. They will be removed relatively quickly.
Yeah.
So alpha striking out strike carriers. Use of bombardment, use of corvettes. At the moment, there are lots of ways to try and counter heavy ground launch lists that are all okay effective. if you do all of them, you might be okay if you're facing a really heavy ground list. I still think there needs to be a little change of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, statistically speaking, like in the event that we went to, we were 1-2 with both ground heavy lists.
Yeah, it can't be a coincidence, can it, that we finished first and second and also bought more ground assets than everyone else. Yeah. On the positive side, let's say for now that it doesn't seem to be around a lot. It's not like it's a hugely prevalent problem, and it's possible that because we see these lists online, they're the vocal Dropfleet players, and it gives a disproportionate effect to how much of a problem it is.
Yeah.
Right now, it's not like every single Dropfleet game is ridiculously ground heavy and not fun. That's not the case now. We're just trying to make everyone aware before it becomes a problem, I suppose.
Yeah, we may find, because it sounded like you two didn't face high drop lists, so you never got a chance to find out what happens when you fight those lists.
Yeah.
Obviously, you probably sounded like you were the most experienced players there as well.
Probably.
I mean, there was the Talon and there was just Chris. Well, there's a couple of others that we've seen at other events, but yeah, I think we probably were the most experienced players.
So that combined with lots of ground assets gave us an advantage.
Gave you a big advantage. So you never know, you might find that someone with less experience in all those ground assets can't win the game as easy.
Thanks for listening. If you've got any more questions or any topics you want us to cover, get in touch on Facebook or Twitter, or you can email us at scannersoffline@gmail.com.
We'd love to have some more questions. It was really nice to be able to answer one from one of our listeners. Shows that we're not just talking into the void.
What's our Twitter handle?
Scanners Offline.